Hey guys, what's up everyone? Welcome back to a new video. In today's video I want to share a couple of things I have learned in the past week while working with Astro and building my own mock API. I want to show you a couple of interesting things that I've learned. For example, that you can create your own API with Astro without the need of running any kind of node server in the background or something like this. You can utilize Netlify to use server-side rendering to dynamically fetch API data either from your own API or from a public API. There's a bunch of things I want to show you in this video. It's just really an introduction to what is possible with the Astro framework and working with APIs. To get started, let's create a new or brand new project with npm create Astro at latest. And if you have been following my channel so far, you're already familiar with that. We have a complete beginner tutorial series for Astro on this channel. And as well as a tutorial series where we build a Linktree clone that we host on Netlify. If you want to check that out, I'll leave the links for you. So we're going to create a new project and we just call that Astro-API. And I'm just gonna move my window a little bit over here so you can see that better. And then we want to create an empty project for this. So we don't need any kind of pre-set up files or something like this. And we also choose to install the npm dependencies as always. And for this project, as a first on this channel, we are going to start using TypeScript for this. But don't worry, it's very simple TypeScript syntax. I'm going to explain it to you while we're working with it so that you can also implement it in your own code. I've been recently learning TypeScript also in the past week, and I've dedicated myself to writing all of my future projects in TypeScript. So we will see how that goes. Would you like to initialize a new Git repository? Yes, whatever. And then for TypeScript, it's totally up to you. You can choose relaxed if you're not comfortable. But for now, we are going to use strict because we are going to use TypeScript. Now we have everything set up and we can open up VS Code. I'm using WSL2 here. If you're interested in getting your terminal looking like mine, there's a whole WSL2 tutorial series on this channel. I put the link in the description. Now to open VS Code out of WSL2 is very easy. You just go, first we need to go inside of the folder. So we go into Astro API. And then you just need to type code and add dot. And this will open up VS Code right out of that folder. There it is. And then we basically don't need this anymore. Okay, so now we have a completely empty project. I'm also just going to quickly add Tailwind to our project in case we need to add some simple styling. That's just npx astro add Tailwind. You don't need to do this, of course. If you just wanna see what we do in this video, you don't need it at all. I'm just gonna leave everything on default. It's very easy to add Tailwind CSS to a Astro project. Basically, that's all there is to it. Now, first, let's go ahead and run our server with npm run dev. And this starts up the dev server. And we just go to localhost 3000 and we have our page here. And if you're familiar with Astro, everything happens here in the index.astro file. I'm not going to create a layout or anything in this tutorial, really. We're just going to keep it simple and focus on the task at hand, which is API. So let's do Astro API. Let's just make it a little bit nicer so that actually you guys can also see that. So we add a Tailwind class here, and let's also add a container, and we also add mxauto to have it a little bit more in the center. And yeah, that's our Astro API now. Okay, so to use Astro API, we have a bunch of options, or to use fetch data from APIs and stuff like this. So I think the first thing we're going to look at is how to fetch data. And for this, we're just going to use JSON placeholder. This is a public API that you can use for mock data if you need any. Whereas basically somewhere here, there's a lot of endpoints and you can just grab this data from those endpoints. Let's go for comments maybe. Yep, this looks good. And here you can see the route that you need to use as well as the data that should come back. Now, if we do that if you want to do that in Astro, we have to write our code between our front matter or between our code fences. Now there are a bunch of ways on how to do that. I think the easiest is to just write a response variable. So we do response and then equal that to await fetch, and GitHub Copilot is already suggesting some things here, but we are just writing a fetch statement, and this is gonna fetch the data for us. Now this data, if it's like if it's a static site, it's only rendered and fetched at build time. That means it's only run once. If you want to add some dynamic, or if you want to make it more dynamic, you have to use server-side rendering. But this is for a more advanced video. This is just really the basics of the API functionality. And then we're going to also create a data variable, and we call that await. And then we do response.json, actually exactly like Copilot suggested it for us. Now this is going to fetch the data, and so far we are not seeing anything. We just know what kind of values or key value pairs come back from here. And if we go back to our index, we can of course then go ahead and map this data somewhere and actually display it on our site. Now for this, we can map over the data array, and then we say item, and then we render some data here. So we do this, we do an arrow function here, and then just let's render an li, and let's say what we want to render. Let's say the item. Now I have to double check what that was. I think there is a name. Yes, there is a name. Item name. Okay. And now because we use TypeScript, it's still working, but it is complaining. You can see that it now automatically fetched the data, and we can see it in here. And we can of course extend on this. We can say this is the name of the post. So we could do post name. That's the item name. And then we should actually wrap this inside of a UL. Let's quickly do this. Okay, now we have a list item here, and now let's do another list item where we say, what's the next one? We can use, let's put the email in there. Email, we say item.email, and then let's add another one in here, another li, and that's gonna be the body. So we say, or the text actually, let's say text, and then we put that in here, which is item.body. Okay, now if we look at that again, we can see all of that data here. Of course, it's not formatted, but the data is here. So we can see the post name, we can see the email address from whoever posted that, and then we can see the text. And this is of course a couple of posts here. Now, if we want to be conform with TypeScript and get rid of this type error here, which says that the item is set to any, and that's what TypeScript doesn't like, we have to create an interface for our response. And the way to do that is we can just create an interface here, and we can call that response data and make that an object. And gladly Copilot already suggests all of that for us. And in fact, all of it is a string. So I'm just going to hit tab for autocomplete. And now we need to tell our map basically that we want to access this response data item. So we do :response data, and the error should disappear. So this looks good, and it's now not throwing any errors anymore. This is just an old error. If we run npm run dev, it should be fine. Now this is the simplest way on how to fetch data, but what if you actually want to create your own API inside of Astro? And that's what we are going to look at next. Creating API endpoints in Astro is really easy because the routing is done automatically, and Astro will automatically recognize that you want to create something that holds API data, or JSON data more precisely, if you just give it the correct extension. Now inside of our pages folder, let's create a new folder, and we call that API. And inside of the API folder, let's create a new file that we will call data.json.ts. Now this can be data.json.ts, or if you just work with JavaScript, it can be data.json.js. The important part is that you have the JSON in between there, so that Astro will recognize that you are working with its API, or more precisely with JSON data. Now, of course, we don't have anything in there and we need to first create that. So let's create some route here. So we do export async function to create an async function. And then we want this function to be a get function. Then we need to enter the params variable here inside of the function. And then we need to say that the type is any, or we can also say string, I believe, which is what we will return. And then we open up a object, and then we return a JSON body. So we do body, and then we say JSON.stringify, and then we create a array of our objects that we want to return. Now for this, we just do name Astro API, and then we do URL, not in caps, and then we do astro.build. And I think we need to set it to any and not to string in that case for it to stop complaining. There we go. So now we are exporting this function, and if we now go ahead and make an API call to this URL, we can just do that by going to the URL. So we do localhost 3000/API / what is it called? We need to say data.json. And if we do that, we get our API data back. Now, how can we fetch this data inside of our index.astro file? And also, if you want to create more API routes, let's say you want to recreate something like JSON placeholder, if you would create all of your interfaces inside of the index.astro file, that would be a bit inconvenient and would clog up the code and make everything a little bit messy. So there is another way we can use this interface instead of just writing it inside of the index.astro file. And that is by creating the interface in here, but exporting it at the same time. So we do export interface. We do also, let's call it response data. Let's call it the same. And then we have the name, which is a string, and we have the URL, which is also a string. And now we are exporting this interface. And the way we can render the data now, if we go back to our index.astro, is by first we are going to delete this response data. Then we want to fetch the data not from here, but, and this is important if you work in dev, in the dev environment, you have to do HTTP and then localhost 3000. And then we do, I think it was API data. Yep, there we go. API data.json. Now it's gonna fetch endlessly. We just cancel the server for now. If you run this on Netlify dev, so if you upload your site to Netlify and you do Netlify dev will run on port 8888. If you want to fetch this data, you don't fetch it from localhost 8888/API/data.json, but you still fetch it from localhost port 3000, otherwise it will not work. Now we fetch this data, and of course it's complaining because it doesn't have the response data in there because we deleted it. And the way we can import that interface that we have created in here is by simply importing it. So we do import type, because we are importing the type here, and then we say response data, and then we import it from, and I think this is the correct path, API data.json, and we still leave it in here as it is, and now you can see it's not complaining anymore. Now of course we don't have a name, so we need, oh, it's actually not in here, it's complaining about that. It's in the top level folder here, there we go. Now it already sees that the Astro API endpoint basically is coming back, but we don't have an email and we don't have a body, but we have a URL. So we say URL, change that up here, URL, and then we say item URL, and we're just gonna delete the body from here. And then we have our data if our server would be running. So let's run our server again. And then we have no type errors, and we have the data coming back from our own API. Now you can totally go ahead and deploy the site on Netlify and then access this data directly from Netlify. Just be aware that you need to use server-side rendering if you want to do that. So the way to do it is, if we go to the docs in here and you go to search and you search for endpoints, I think, you see server endpoints API routes. And if you go there, you see a disclaimer that you need to enable SSR before trying these examples. And the way to do that is, if you are running it on Netlify, you have to put the output on the Astro config MJS file to server, which you can find here. And if you have Tailwind integrated via CLI, which I recommend you to do, then, not Tailwind, sorry, Netlify, then you can just put the output to server and it will automatically work once you have it uploaded to Netlify. Okay guys, I hope I was able to show you some interesting things that you didn't know yet with using APIs in Astro. I think it's really easy and convenient to work with APIs in Astro. You don't need any complicated syntax like in React to render or to fetch your data or to write any complicated components. I think this is a really beautiful way on learning how APIs work because it's so easy to write. So you could rebuild a API, or you can use the Poke API, for example, to build some dynamic cards that get automatically rendered and stuff like this. Yeah, I will do more videos on that in the future. Just let me know what you guys would like to see, and also make sure to subscribe to the channel and hit the notification bell that you get informed when I upload a new tutorial on Astro or any other framework. Alright guys, I thank you very much for watching. Let me know what you think about it in the comments below, and see you back in the next one. Until then.